Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
Outspoken Anglican priest Ranflee Brown says the government's new immigration policy must include everyone.
The Attorney General addressing the Interception of Communications bill. Find out what he had to say coming up.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive. Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Vonique Tude. Topping news tonight, on the heels of the Prime Minister's warning to illegal migrants, Immigration Minister Brent Simonet revealed new details on that policy today and shot down criticisms from human rights groups. This as more migrants reacted to that announcement. Jasmine Brown reports.
It's someone who's caught on the streets on the 2nd of January, who has never made an attempt to come into immigration, does not have a receipt for filing a document, and never have any piece of paper. I think the Prime Minister's made it very clear what's going to happen.
Simonet was asked to elaborate on the policy outlined by the Prime Minister in the House of Assembly on Wednesday.
We are talking about people who have come here to avoid or avoiding applying for a work permit or status to be here. Those are the people this is addressed at. If you are a permanent resident, Bahamian, living here, who is hiring one of those people, you have to make sure you regularize your employees before that time. Failure to do so, the appropriate action will start to happen on the 2nd of January, 2018.
Dr. Minnis gave illegal immigrants until the end of the year to get themselves regularized or be pursued aggressively. He also threatened to take action against Bahamians who employ illegal migrants after December 31st. Some activists and migrants have expressed concern over the timeline given, but Simonet was adamant that just over 2 months is more than enough time for people living in the Bahamas illegally for years to get their necessary documents.
If you have entered this country illegally, you have done an act which is illegal. Full stop.
It's a sentiment shared by several of the people we spoke to outside the Department of Immigration, from Bahamians hiring migrants to migrants living legally in the Bahamas. Many call the policy fair.
Well, I've hired non-Bahamians, but they were persons who had a work permit. You know, I can't jeopardize myself by hiring illegals because at the end of the day, I have to be held responsible. It's the right thing to do.
We have laws and rules in every country. Abide by rules and law and regulations. It's the right thing, I guess.
If we really want to keep those people in our household, then we will meet the Prime Minister's whatever he desires. We will meet it if we want to have it that way. That's what it is.
We need to get everything in order. And for people to be here running loose. Because you can't govern the country without laws and order. So I think that's a good plan.
Do you think it's enough time for December 31st to be a timeline for these people to get their stuff straight?
Well, people done already illegal, so they don't break in the law. So if that give them time, that if the stuff wasn't straight, at least it's time to get your stuff in order.
Then there was this teen who says the Prime Minister's warning prompted her to apply for a belonger's permit. Born in the Bahamas to Haitian parents, the 17-year-old says she was unsure if she falls in the category of migrants who stand to be affected. Simonet confirmed that people like Diana Desir, who are entitled to apply for status in the Bahamas, have no reason to worry about the policy. While that may be the case, Desir says she has friends and even family who will be impacted.
I mean, not my family members, but I know some people who will have to leave very soon.
And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't say nothing. The rules is the rules. If that's what they think is good for the country, well, let it be done.
Meantime, the immigration minister says officials expect there will be a rush of applicants, and the department is looking at how it will best handle the influx. As for those whose applications are not processed before the December 31st deadline, Simonet says there will be leniency for those who at least start the process.
Start the process now to get a work permit legally. You're to be out of the country. That's number one requirement. To get a work permit, you should be out of the country. So I don't expect them walking up downstairs, because that means they're in the country. If someone is on the street on the 2nd of January, but whose application is in.
That's my next question.
That's when we talk about we're going to deal with this humanely and as best we can.
So, it's just for my understanding, will there be some...
Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Former Commissioner of Police Alison Greenslade has been appointed as High Commissioner of the Bahamas to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Greenslade has also been appointed as the country's permanent representative to the International Maritime Organization, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His appointment follows months of uncertainty regarding his future with the force. Deputy Commissioner Anthony Ferguson has been the acting commissioner while Greenslade was on leave. As previously reported, former Free National Movement Chairman Sidney Colley has been appointed Ambassador of the Bahamas to the United States of America and as permanent representative to the Organization of American States. Meanwhile, former North Eleuthera MP Theo Neely will head the consulate in Washington, D.C. Astra Ambrister will head the consulate in Atlanta. Linda Trico will head the consulate in Miami, and former Cabinet Minister Larry Cartwright will head the consulate in New York. And speaking of changes, Managing Director of the Public Hospitals Authority Herbert Brown will begin pre-retirement leave on Monday, with his official retirement taking effect March 1st, 2018. Brown announced his retirement yesterday in a letter to PHA staff, saying his journey in the public service and subsequently the PHA began in the 70s, and he has enjoyed his more than 40 years immensely. A retirement luncheon will be held for Brown tomorrow. 2 gunmen traveling in a white vehicle sprayed a man with bullets as he was standing outside his Romer Street home in the Fox Hill area this afternoon before reportedly ditching the getaway vehicle in Nassau Village. Senior Assistant Commissioner of Police Stephen Dean says the shooting incident happened shortly before 1 p.m.
An adult male was standing in front of his residence with 2 other persons. When a white vehicle pulled up, 2 persons came out with firearms, fired shots at them. The vehicle ran off. The victim ran off, but he was chased down by the men and fatally shot. The vehicle then left the scene.
The historic community has been the scene of several killings and shooting incidents in recent weeks, including the murders of 2 teen boys. The alarming rise in gun violence in Fox Hill prompted police to launch a major crime suppression operation in that area last month.
Despite the heavy police presence in this area, we noticed instances we've been blighted by this incident, but we are not giving up. We feel comfortable. Shortly thereafter, we were able to recover a vehicle we suspect to be involved in this incident in the Nassau Village area. We are pursuing some leads in that.
Despite this latest killing, Dean says police have been making positive strides in that area.
We have seen some positive results over the past week. We continue to take firearms and drugs out of this area. We will work till we get all of the drug peddlers and all the persons who are in possession of firearms in this area. So we are appealing to members of the public. We know that firearms still exist. We know that drugs still exist. But as we get the intelligence, we will continue to pursue those persons.
And as police investigate this latest murder, former inmates and ex-gang members are speaking out on a major issue: the number of illegal weapons on the streets and how they got there. April Sands tells us more.
Behind the gates of some of the island's most affluent communities is where these ex-convicts say illegal weapons smuggled into the country are hidden. Speaking with our News at the Hope Center, which has become a place of refuge for former gang members seeking to adjust to life outside of prison, ex-cons claim yachts are often used to bring in illegal firearms undetected. Former gang member Shelton Burrows, also known as Apples, says those old tricks have been overlooked for years.
For years, we know that all of these marine areas where people live, they could carry the boat out and bring the boat back in without custom checking. We all know the problem, man. We get duck and put our head in the sand and run around it. You know what I mean? And the streets will tell you that. Either you're real or you're joking. You know what I mean? And so, you know, the basic reality is, I guess, if we want to see a major change with this gun movement, 4 years for handgun. Machine gun, 20 years. AKA, 25. If we get catch with 5 gun, 5 times 4 years. That's 25 years. Let's deal with it how we really did deal with it. You will see a drop on fellas them toting gun because they know now how this thing works.
Former inmate turned owner of Divine Touch Car Wash, Mandel Miller, he says smuggling firearms into the Bahamas has become as easy as obtaining a driver's license.
To be honest with you, at this present time, I believe that it is easier to get involved in a gang, buy an illegal gun, buy drugs, or any of those things than it is to get a driver's license or driver's permit right now for young people. And I believe a lot of them will agree with me with that. That's just the reality of the society we live in, and we have to now take practical steps and be intentional about limiting the opportunities for this illicit lifestyle in our country. We've ignored it for too long, from the top to the bottom.
Reformed criminals describe the importation of guns as a multi-million-dollar business that many in the country are profiting from, even those who may surprise you.
And our leaders, some of our leaders, involved inside these things. You know what I mean? And not just political leaders, spiritual leaders, business leaders. You know what I mean? And I'm a realist. I keep it real. Because coming from the street, you know what I mean? I don't believe in nonsense and garbage.
This as authorities continue to grapple with the issue of gun violence. More than 100 people have been murdered in the Bahamas this year. Statistics show most of them lost their lives to gun violence, like 8-year-old Eugene Woodside, who was inside his home doing schoolwork when he was struck by a bullet intended for another person. Burroughs says something must be done about the country's gun laws.
Nowadays, you have machine gun, you have AKA. Fellas, them ain't shooting you now with no handgun. Handgun is a joke. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? But see, the sad reality is that guess what? Our laws are too weak. It's too weak. We have fellas them who the police catch with a ton of gun, go before the courts, and they get a few years. Whereas the laws in the books, if you get catch with one gun, you're supposed to get 4 years. But a fella get catch with a ton of gun, but he getting 4 or 5 years, and that ain't making no sense. That ain't making no sense. You know what I mean? Our laws is just too weak.
Burroughs says he feels the country's laws serve some and not others, adding the Bahamas is way too small for everyone to truly be held accountable.
Honestly, one of the most critical challenges we have with our correctional system is we have too many young people on remand with idle time. That's one of our most critical problems, because them sitting there as property almost of the court system and not of Her Majesty's prison, so that Her Majesty's prison can engage them in meaningful activity. Them just sitting there on remand, they're almost brewing crime. Like they have so much idle time among themselves that the most they get is on a Sunday, you have a Pastor Carlos Reed or a Pastor so-and-so will go and give them an encouraging word, and that's the most they get.
Reporting for our news, I'm April Sands.
Attorney General Carl Bethel is hitting back at critics of the so-called spy bill, insisting they should read the bill before commenting. Here's Jared Higgs.
That's rhetoric. That is nothing but rhetoric and is not true.
Attorney General Carl Bethel was adamant that the Interception of Communications bill tabled by the Free National Movement government is like night and day when compared to the controversial bill put forth by the last Christie administration. Critics of the bill have dubbed the proposed legislation as worse than what was presented by the former government.
Many of the persons who rush to criticize the tabling of the Interception of Communications bill had never even read it before they launched their criticisms. So they can call it all sorts of names, and the latest thing is it's, now you said, potentially worse than the PLP's bill. It's not worse than the PLP's bill at all. It's a vast improvement.
The Minister of Legal Affairs says under the initial bill, any breach of law, no matter how minor, could result in communications being intercepted. Bethel recalled when police executed a search warrant at the home of former F&M Chairman Darren Cash in a matter that he says didn't warrant such force. The Attorney General contends the new bill would have prevented that search, ultimately providing more protections to the average citizen.
So when they went into Darren Cash's house on a search warrant, because of a complaint by his wife's employer, which is ordinarily a civil matter, and the police went there in front of his wife and took his computer, his phone, his wife's phone, computer, and held them for days on a search warrant because of a complaint of an employer, that will not be able to happen under this bill. So this bill will give more protections to the Bahamian people than presently exist under the present law.
Mr. Bethel says the main difference between the PLP and FNM bill is that under the former administration, any breach of law could lead to your communication being intercepted. In its current form, the Attorney General says the law only applies to specific offenses.
The PLP had any law covered. We restricted to higher order offenses: terrorism, money laundering, drug trafficking, human trafficking, proliferation offenses, really serious criminal offenses, murder, attempted murder, etc.
The Attorney General added that the Minnis administration will pay close attention to public consultation, having recently met with civil society organizations, including the We March movement, which is led by FNM Senator Bernard Henfield. Reporting for our news, I'm Jared Higgs.
The AG also hitting back at comments by Attorney Fred Smith, who called the current enforcement of immigration laws illegal. Bethel says the current administration should not be judged by mistakes of the past.
There have been many challenges over the years of the immigration laws, and there have been successes and there have been failures. Undoubtedly, creative minds will continually find ways to challenge them if that is what people wish to do. That's why we have an independent judiciary and court system. The responsibility of the government, though, is to enforce the law in the best interests of all the Bahamian people. And to criticize the enforcement of law on the basis of what may have been past errors, or emotionally criticize it in a way that would suggest that the law should not be enforced, is unfortunate.
Bethel says the way forward was clearly outlined by Minister of Immigration Brent Simonet and the Prime Minister.
What we do hope and expect is that the government, as was proclaimed in the House of Assembly by both the Minister of Immigration, responsible for immigration, and the Prime Minister, that the government will act in accordance with all established laws and legal precedents as set forth in the several rulings on these matters going forward, and that everybody who has constitutional rights can confidently expect that those constitutional rights will be fully protected.
And still to come on our news, an outspoken Anglican priest speaks out in support of government's warning to illegal migrants. The details after this break.